Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to Marketing Leaders Circle and our very first event, Marketing Leaders Circle Talks. My name is Jessica Lapsiwala, and I'm Content Director at Marketing Leaders Circle, and a very warm welcome to you all. I'm going to be your host for this next hour. We've got a jam-packed programme with a very special guest for a one-to-one interview and a super panel of experts for a roundtable discussion. But before we move on to the content, I am going to hand it over the founder of Marketing Leaders Circle, Sadie Broom, to tell you a little bit more about this exciting new venture and also to give you insight into why this much needed networking club has been created. Take it away, Sadie.
Thanks, Jessica. And again, I extend my warm welcome. This was an idea of mine about 3 years ago, and it really came from the amount of conversations that I was having with clients and industry friends and colleagues around how they wanted to be able to share that knowledge that they have, even with their counterparts and even with their competition. People just really wanted to get that knowledge out there. And also everyone wanted to network. Now, obviously, we haven't been able to do that in the way that I planned. And when I decided to get going on this project, whilst I was in lockdown, I just thought, right, okay, well, we'll be out of it soon and we'll be doing this event live at IBC or one of the other trade shows. Obviously, that hasn't happened. So we are here virtually. The networking will be different, but we'll be telling you more about that as the weeks go on through the Marketing Leaders Circle website and social media. This project would not have been possible without the advisory board. And when I set it up, it was a key thing for me to have an advisory board. And we have one. They've been brilliant. They're a global board from different parts of the sector. And they've just been fantastic in helping me push through this and through the ideas for the circle. So all I'm going to say apart from that is please go onto the website later on. It should be live when this talk finishes. So I haven't pressed the big button yet, so that you can concentrate on listening to our amazing speakers. Please join and spread the word. Enjoy these great talks, and I will hand back over to Jessica. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sadie. An informative overview, and we're all waiting for you to push that big button at 6 o'clock. Tense moment. Okay, so on with the programme. I'm going to introduce you to our first segment. We've got an interview going to be hosted by Anne-Louise Buick, Global Revenue Marketing at Avid. She's going to be in conversation with business leader, non-executive director, and Emmy Award-winning producer, Christine Lozicat, who is MBE, no less. So over to you guys.
So as Jessica said, I'm Anne-Louise Buick. I'm the Vice President of Revenue Marketing at Avid. I've been in the media and entertainment technology space for about 20 years now. In addition to my Avid role, I'm an advisory board member of RISE, which is an organisation focused on advancing and supporting women from all backgrounds working in the broadcast tech sector. And as part of that group, I'm also one of their mentors as part of their award-winning mentoring programme. And I'm also on the board of the IABM. But now I'm here as an advisory board member of this new Marketing Leaders Circle, which, as Sadie said at the top, has been established for senior marketing professionals in the B2B media and entertainment space to network, learn and create change. And we're going to talk a little bit more about creating change, as I am really delighted to introduce our first Circle Talks and welcome Christine Lozicat as our first speaker. Welcome, Christine. Christine is an independent senior business leader. She's board chair, international business strategy, marketing and communications specialist. And as Jessica said, also an Emmy award-winning producer. Christine in her career has been MD of British Design Initiative and International Marketing Director for Video at BMG Entertainment. And she's worked on quite a few high-profile diverse projects, including as the creative advisor to the UK government, She created and delivered the Prime Minister's Business Programme at the London 2012 Olympics, and as part of the multi-award winning participation at Milan Expo 2015. And one of the significant impacts of those two projects that Christine led was that they contributed to over 15 billion in economic value to the UK. Additionally, to balance her business roles, Christine is heavily involved in the charity sector, more of which I'm sure we'll hear about as she takes up the microphone. And as Jessica said, in 2016, Christine was awarded an MBE for services to the creative industries. So Christine, welcome. We're delighted to have you as the first Circle Talker.
Thanks very much.
I've given a very brief summary, Christine, of a very varied and packed career full of achievements. So, in your own words, I'd like to hear from you. What moments are you most proud of? What are your highlights and spotlights?
So many. I think every single job and every single role I've done has been fantastically rewarding in different ways. I wish I could say I had a really solid career path in mind. Well, actually, that's not true. I did have a very solid career path in mind when I was young. I wanted to become an international lawyer and be, a major defender of human rights. And I did, in fact, that's what brought me to the UK. To read international law. And I rapidly found that it wasn't quite for me because I really didn't have the patience for the length of time that international court cases take, particularly if you're dealt the defense card for somebody that perhaps you really didn't, whose values you didn't share, let's put it that way. So I very quickly fell into the creative sector. Yeah. I was in London and I ended up working for the most amazing advertising agency called Cream at the time that basically worked for the music and the film industry. So at a very young age, I fell into the most awesome projects, both creatively, but also from a learning perspective, because in essence, what that became was an apprenticeship. It's not what you would call it now, but I basically learned on the job. And every time somebody left, I got moved into that job. And then, so I learned print buying, and then I learned media buying, and then I learned studio management, and so on and so forth, which really is what gave me such a solid grounding in the creative sector, but also in management. And so that was definitely a really solid highlight, my time at Cream. I then was lucky enough to get headhunted by BMG, where I saw the world, literally. As Director of International Marketing, my domain was World ex North America, but I reported to New York. So I spent my entire life on airplanes and saw every corner and every culture. And of course, when you're marketing an emotional product, if I can call our musicians that, probably kill me for calling them a product. But when you're marketing something like that, you're marketing in a very emotional environment, So you get to become very culturally aware.
They say passionate.
Oh, yes, and passionate. Yes, definitely. You get very passionate. So that was a highlight, and then learning all about kids animation was wonderful. Was yet another highlight. Clearly, winning an Emmy is something that doesn't happen to people every day. Highly unexpected, and in fact, when we were nominated, I was actually between jobs, and I wasn't exactly the wealthiest. I was like, the bank balance was a bit low. And I remember ringing the Emmy people and saying, "Hello, little producer from London here. Can you just give me a heads up? What are the chances?" And I just got this really curt, "Ma'am, being nominated is enough to get your ass over here." I was like, okay. That told me. So I went, and it was awesome. But I mean, look, everything. The Olympics were amazing. I was so lucky to be part of that. Everyone that was in the UK at the time, I think, felt a great sense of, unity and just the ambition of the athletes, just the whole thing was just wonderful. And I'd never really been part of an expo either. Of course, was invented in the UK back in the 1800s by Prince Albert, and that tradition is carried on. And to be in an environment where you get 20 million people visiting you is extraordinary. That's a lot of people. and it's a lot of people to try and not detract you from your creative vision, let's put it that way. So yes, lots of things.
And lots of highlights and spotlights, but also a really varied career trajectory and very fulfilling. But you know, when you think about the creative elements coming from law, going into a creative role, and then, you know, driving multiple complex projects and initiatives that both foster creativity, the innovation and partnership. And these projects, to me, speak to differing values that you care about. So, you know, thinking about the values that you care about as a leader and a business leader, what drives you to do all of these, multiple complex projects in, you know, both the business sector and the charity sector? And then, in addition, you know, we all have drives. So, what drives you? But then also from that, what's fulfilling you in those roles?
What drives me now is probably not quite the same as what drove me early on. I think early on I was very driven by a really strong survival instinct. I grew up in a very turbulent European landscape that was filled with terrorism, basically, some of which we experienced directly in our family. And I think when you're a child and you come across sort of life and death scenarios and situations, it sort of changes your perspective on life. Well, not just if you're a child, but especially when you're a child. It changes your outlook on life. And so when I came here, into the UK, which is where really I started my career, I was very ambitious and I was very driven and I was going to be the best at everything that I did. That's not driven me so much recently. I think really in the heart of my value system is integrity. There's also a very strong sense of justice, and which is why I wanted to go into law in the first place. But I've been able to express that value through different projects and through different work. So, for example, when I was at BMG, we supported the world's first World AIDS Day. We supported Amnesty International with projects, Greenpeace. You know, there were different ways of bringing out the highlighting the injustice that was being done to people around the world. And so that still drives me, and that actually still makes me get out of bed every day. And so, for example, my chairing Advance, which is one of the UK's leading frontline domestic abuse charities, that's very much about making a difference to those who can't necessarily help themselves at a particular moment in their lives, and making that difference to, I have to say, especially women. That's not to say that men aren't also have vulnerable scenarios, but you know, the economic empowerment of women globally is what's going to take. That's what it's going to take to stop climate change, you know, becoming the disaster or carrying on being the disaster that it is. So that gets me out of bed. But, you know, so does having fun. It's really important. Look, I work really, really hard. And I think everyone that I've ever worked with in the creative sphere is really hard working. And when you work really hard, I think it's actually quite important to be able to play and to have fun. And I think the marketing discipline is quite well known for having a lot of fun. So that's important too. And friendship, of course.
Yeah, having fun, but still delivering results, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I liked what you were saying there about, you know, your work with the charity is about advocating and supporting others who may be not unable to do that for themselves. And that's, you know, a key quality in a leader as well, to recognize how you support and bring on new talent, how you develop leaders. And it's a quality for a business leader to recognize that in themselves and in others, especially when you think about leadership has to be developed within us before we can help others to grow in that area. So take on self-edification. And one of the best experiences that you've encountered in your career that have helped you as a leader and helped you develop others to be future leaders.
I was sort of thinking earlier, you know, what really made a difference to my career. And I think I can very firmly point at two people. it's a bit like Malcolm Gladwell's sort of outliers. There are two people that fundamentally influence the way that I work, and they probably don't even know they've done it. But I learned from one. I learned a lot about presentation, about delivery, and about presence, which is quite important when you're a leader. And you can't be a little mouse, even if you feel like it sometimes. You can't be that. You have to portray confidence. And what the other leader taught me was to shout about my achievements, which is something that doesn't necessarily come natural to a lot of people. But I learned from him there would not be a single sentence in a meeting or a single paragraph where we didn't somehow manage to weave in an achievement of his. That sounds worse than it is. He just did it really well. And I thought, I should start doing that. And the minute I started doing that, there was a massive step change in how people perceived me. And it felt very uncomfortable at first, and I probably do it without even realizing now. And I would really say to other people, don't be shy. Don't be shy in coming forward. If you're confident and proud of your achievements.
Yeah, being your own PR is I think it's a skill that a lot of people, as you say, it doesn't come naturally, but it is really important. Some people, you be in situations when the room will go quiet, and that's when you can step up and you can, provide opportunities for you to shine, for your team to shine, for a project that you're working on shine. People always want to hear about successes, and it fosters other success. And so given what you've said about developing leadership skills and, thinking about continuous improvement strategies and methods that we can all lean in and support each other, as one of the founding principles of the Marketing Leaders Circle, how can members in this circle really lean into it and help it be a group and a membership that is advantageous to them to help them as leaders?
Well, one, collaborate and share. But we're sharing, when somebody shares something with you that is so personal and so deep that it will result in a change in them, because often you need to go quite deep to make a step change. You just recognize that that person at that moment is quite vulnerable. So can you be kind to one another? Sometimes there's this thing about leaders having to be bossy and nasty. They don't. It's about having emotional intelligence. It's about different organizations have different cultures. And so to be a leader at Apple is a completely different thing. To be a leader at, Addison Lee, you have different value. The staff are asked to support different value systems, different behaviors. And so there isn't a one size fit all. But the one thing that I've definitely taken from my life is that recognizing enthusiasm, passion, and curiosity in a person and enabling them to flourish with a degree of discipline around that makes for really fantastic leaders. And it far outstrips those sort of attributes, far outweigh any type of qualification in my mind. Clearly, if you're a heart surgeon, you need to be qualified. But if you're talking about CEOs, chair people, managing directors, then it's about harnessing passion, particularly now, and particularly this year. This year has been a tough year. People have had really difficult times, and being able to just bring that sense of enthusiasm that you can normally do face to face, that's quite a challenge. But marketing people are really good at this. This is what you guys do. This is what everyone does every day. And you inspire not just your team, but your customers. That's ultimately what it's about. And it's, for an association like this,
I'm just thinking of a phrase. I think you said it to me. Was it fail forward, fail fast, get up and carry on? I can't remember if it was when I was speaking to you, but somebody said that recently. And that's when leadership can allow people to flourish, and we see improvement, and we see some, things that you never thought that you could achieve. And, failing forward is, it's a new concept to some people. Have you seen, great oak trees grow out of small failing acorns in your past?
I tell you, all of the big sort of infrastructure-led type projects that I've worked on have failed about 90 million times before they came to fruition. Because whenever you do something new and whenever you do something that hasn't been tried before, you fall over all the time. But what keeps it going are the people that you work with and the people and the culture that you build around yourself to allow that to happen, and for people not to get dispirited by it and depressed, but to take it as oh, well, never mind, onwards. We learned that doesn't work. Let's try it this way. And if you can foster that kind of sense of permission to fail, that's really important.
Absolutely. We've got one question that's come in, Christine, and the question is, what's the one thing you do every day that makes you more effective? Is there just one thing that you do every day, or is it a series of things?
I walk my dog. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I do. I walk my dog, and when I walk my dog out in Richmond Park, rain, snow, thunder, hail, shine, that is my thinking time. I normally do it in the morning. And so it sets me up for the day, and I plan my day, I prioritize. And sometimes, nature is a wonderful thing to be in when, your head is full of stuff. And most of my best ideas and my biggest inspirations have come in the middle of Richmond Park, just walking my dog.
That's perfect. Give yourself some mind space.
Yeah.
As a result of those great moments when you've had brilliant ideas, do you have an example of when you've managed to change someone's mindset? That's another question from the audience.
Change someone's mindset. Yeah. Actually, quite often. I've had to do that quite often. And it's one of the reasons why, 2006, I actually did a coaching course, because I found myself having to do that so many times, and I didn't really feel like I had the tools in my toolbox to cope with that, because I hadn't worked once I left BMG, I was in essence, I've been self-employed ever since, or run my own business. So I haven't had that sort of corporate learning environment where they send you on all these courses. I've sort of had to find my own. But I did a coaching course specifically to give me the frameworks within which I can help people find their own way to changing their minds, if that is in fact what needs doing.
Yeah. And I know we're just going to come up to time. So I'm going to ask you to leave us with one rallying call from your experiences in your career to this marketing leaders group in the B2B and media and entertainment technology space. What rallying call would you give to us as the senior marketing leaders in this space as we move forward and leave this shocking year behind us and approach a better one in 2021?
Be monumentally relevant. You guys, marketeers, are people that drive the business. You're the people, we are the people that are the route to new customers. We develop new business models. We are the revenue generation machine, and we need to be seen as solid investment as opposed to a cost, particularly right now. So lean in big time.
Thank you very much. Now, we've got another couple of questions that have come in, but I know that Jessica likes us to stay on time and promised that we would. So I might pose those to you over email, Christine, and solicit some response, and we'll get them out via the Marketing Leaders Circle network. But thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you joining us on this launch event and for all of your insights. And we hope that we see you back here very soon. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Anne-Louise. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Anne-Louise. Thank you, Christine. What an inspiration, and some comments coming online to say that the most important discussion of the day is definitely with the dog in the morning. So a lot of people agreeing with you there. Okay, guys, so time to move on to the next segment. of our event. It's time for the Chiefs Table discussion. And is it time to rename the CMO? So I'm very excited to welcome to the roundtable discussion 3 brilliant guests. We have Sarah Kurderly, Director of Marketing at Payzer, which specializes in mission-critical video distribution systems. Sarah is also SMPTE Fellow, so hats off to you, Sarah. We've got Chris Pellicunu, who is former Chief Customer Officer at Clear Channel. There he was leading the approach to international sales and customer relationships and positioning the brand across Europe. Chris also likes to watch gymnastics, interestingly. And finally, we have Floor Thibergain, I hope I said that correctly, joining us from France. Floor is the VP of Global Brand Media and Growth at the music streaming platform Deezer. She's also an ex-Googler and a digital brand expert. So we're very lucky, and I'm sure that everyone on screen virtually would like to welcome you all to this roundtable discussion. So just to set the context, in the last few months, we've read about some companies and corporates who are getting rid of their CMOs and restructuring their business, whilst others are reinstating the role of CMO. And so there's a lot of inconsistency around that CMO role at the moment and what it means for the future. So we've brought this panel together to really discuss the future of the role, and they've all got very different job titles, as you've just heard. So it'll be interesting to hear what they've got to say. And I'm going to start off with Sarah, actually, as marketing director. What falls under your remit? I know, obviously, marketing director sounds quite self-explanatory, but it would be really good, Sarah, if you can give us a kind of overview of what key things come under your remit.
Certainly, Jessica. Thank you for having me here. These days, a lot of things fall under my umbrella. I'm in charge of everything from, everything that goes out to the to our customers and to our general audience. It's everything from the website. It's the overall strategy. It's the budget. There's the shows, events, any kind of collateral, any kind of branding, messaging, just about everything that tells our story to either our external customers and to our internal customers as well, our sales team and our service and support teams too. So it's a very, very broad role. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the kind of key things as a marketing director that have changed over the last year, particularly? Sort of what are the new demands of your role?
I think part of some of the new demands of my role, actually, it's kind of twofold. For one, it's a lot of teams are getting smaller. So I have noticed that a lot more, some of the details fall more on me. I have to do, everything from the social media posts to actually editing the website to sometimes it's writing the press release. Is it, everything. It's every little detail kind of comes down to me rather than having people to delegate it to. So it does all fall on my back. And secondly, I think it's really changed because before our sales team really relied on in-person events and connecting physically in person. They could show them something. They could give them a live demo. They could let them hold the product and things like that. And now it's very virtual. So there's the big challenge of how do you, so now my role has changed to trying to get our message out in a very virtual way and connecting with people virtually. And so it was a big pivot and a big change.
And has your organization had to make any sort of structural changes due to the pandemic and the fact that everything is done on via virtual platforms now?
I wouldn't say that the structure there changed so much as the structure. Well, I guess in a way it did because of the it's best if marketing can lead sales. And sometimes sales, especially when they have these in-person events, they kind of go off and they're doing their thing. But now that they don't have that in-person events, they really have to rely a little bit more on marketing to lead. And what really helped was to bring marketing and sales really into a lockstep. And that required, we had a new person come in to take over leading the sales team. And so it just happened that he happened to have a background in leading some marketing. And so he pulled together the marketing and the sales team rather than having them kind of more disparate. I mean, marketing was doing what marketing did, but it didn't always tie in with what the sales team was doing because they were led by a different leader, and there wasn't that the communication against the silos across the silos. So this helped tie it together.
I guess that's really a benefit of having someone with a marketing background. They can show a little bit of empathy and understand, where marketing are coming from, and like you said, bring the teams together rather than forge them apart.
Yes, and he definitely saw the value in marketing. He definitely believes in the value of marketing and that it's not a cost, it's an investment, and that we really do need marketing at this point, probably more than ever, because we can't get the word out without it.
Well said. Yes, indeed, I agree. Okay. I'm just going to go over to Chris now, and let's hear a bit from Chris. So, Chris, until recently, you were Chief Customer Officer at Clear Channel, and that's really a job title that we've seen a lot more of recently, a kind of an emerging job title, and it's become quite a trend. I mean, is it a trend? Tell us what it means. What's a Chief Customer Officer?
I wish I knew. No, the reality is, I think it is a trend, because I think if you look at the last 3 years in particular, there's been a tenfold increase in that title, so from about 2017 right through to now. So clearly something is happening, and I've had many debates around: is it necessary to change the title? I think it is in some ways, because it's a signal that the organisations are really thinking about the customer, and businesses have talked about being customer-centric for many years, but I think the reality is they found it quite difficult to do so, to really own that journey, not just externally, the end-to-end journey, but also internally as well. And I think some of these changes are really signalling as much internally as they are externally, to really suggest and really indicate that the customer has to really come first. And bearing in mind that businesses as well are trying to move away from silos. There's these big silos with big barriers between departments. And I think the one thing that can cut through all of that really is the customer. The customer has to be important to the idea, to the products that they're creating, to the communication, to the sales of that. Every department has to really have an understanding of what the customer is and is about. And I think you need a champion within the business to do that. And I think having a Chief Customer Officer really does indicate the importance. And also, there are many, many more touch points now with the customer. So there has to be a consistency throughout all these touch points, all these channels, because that's getting harder and harder. And also at the sales end as well. And I think Sarah just pointed that out, that sales really is an extension of marketing, and marketing is a precursor to it. So the two have to work hand in hand. And I think that hasn't always happened in the past. So I think if someone that owns the whole journey, internally and externally, I think is the beginning to integrate your marketing throughout the business, when I have it at the center rather than as something separate to the rest of the business. The business goes and does something, creates something, then hands it over to the marketing department to go out and communicate it. I think that's the wrong approach. Most businesses intellectually understand that, but to bring it to the center sometimes can be really, really difficult. And add all those layers around channels and touch points, you've also got data, and that's increasingly becoming much, much more important, and certainly first-party data. And I think a lot of businesses clearly have recognised for a while and have been desperately trying to organise their own data to be much more valuable to them. And I think that's going to be increasingly more important. And that really should be the role of the Chief Customers Officers, or the CMO for that matter, owning that data and understanding the customer. Because not only do you begin to recognise what the customer is doing, not just on a behavioural sense, but on a buying sense, knowing how they're behaving with and experiencing your own company, your own business. And I think by having that, really does begin to make you a much sharper, smarter business, because not only do you then react to them, but also you can start to predict what that customer is doing or wanting potentially in the future. And also you can have a much better relationship with them once they are your customer, rather than forget about them. So all these things are quite complex now and very easy to say and intellectually understand, but to actually get a business geared up around that is quite hard. And I think Christine mentioned it earlier on as well, which I think is a really crucial one, is that when I say customer, I'm also referring to all stakeholders. That's supplier, that's also employees, to galvanize the workforce around a single vision, a single purpose, and then to begin to really, for them to obsess about the customer, makes it a much easier process to integrate your marketing right at the center of that business. So those are, I think, the issues why I don't think it's necessary to change the title. Sorry, go on. You say?
Sorry, I was just going to say, what would you say are what's your advice for being able to galvanize people internally as well as externally? What's the key thing that people need to do to change people's mindsets?
Yeah, again, very easy things to talk about, but very hard to achieve, I think, sometimes. More people, more customers now are wanting a much stronger value proposition, or much stronger, or believe in values, and they can easily identify with certain values that businesses have. And this goes beyond the product. Historically, these the brands sat out on the front, and the companies sat behind them, and no one really knew much about the brands. But in the last sort of couple of decades, people find it much easier now and really want to be associated with certain companies that have strong values, or values that are relevant to them. So I think the same applies for employees. They've got to understand what the values are of the business. What is the purpose of the business? This is not just about producing things. There should be a really strong purpose of why. Why do people get out of bed, or why should people buy your product? And I think you're asking people to choose you over and above everyone else. You're asking customers to come to you and choose you. And there's a myriad of choices out there. They're being bombarded all over the place. Why should they choose you over and above everyone else? And you can talk about unique product differentiation, but the reality is that's quite a hard thing to do. So you have to have some differentiation, but also the values that you portray are critical to your customers, but also critical to your own employees. If they believe in your vision, if they believe in the values that the company has and upholds and lives by them day in, day out, then they will start to go beyond just getting up in the morning and seeing it as a job. They see it as something more than that. They have a higher purpose, if you like, and it all sounds quite grand. But when you achieve that, it's quite exciting, because it becomes quite empowering, because then people, your employees, will start to make suggestions on what should be done or how things can be improved. And this incredible empowering of your employees makes it a much healthier environment, and people get excited about that, excited about coming in, and that comes out in the external part of the business as well. You see it in the communications, you see it in salespeople, you see it at board level. So I think these things are, again, easy to say, but quite hard to achieve. And also you have to have a bit of patience as well, because they take time. You're not going to achieve this overnight. This is not a 100-day turnaround plans that people have. It takes much longer than that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. I'm going to go over to Flor for a second, and then we're going to have some group discussion. Hello, Flor.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. So you've got a super job title. You've got the job title of VP of Global Brand, Media and Growth, which sounds like a huge responsibility, and I imagine it is. So are you a CMO in disguise?
That's a great question. So first, it is definitely a lengthy title, and I think it reflects, the priorities that we actually have at Deezer. To reply to your tricky question, I do think I'm part CMO, but I would say the way I would put it is that I'm probably 1/3 of a CMO. And the reason why I would say that is that historically at Deezer, marketing responsibilities, CMO responsibilities have always been under the authority of a chief commercial officer. And what it means is that having commercial plus marketing responsibilities is a lot. So the way we decided to split things at Deezer is between these three different things that I will develop right now. So first, this job that I have of VP of Global Brand Growth and Media, mainly focused, on acquiring new customer, defining a strong brand platform. To Chris' point, I think it's really important, to step away from having only a functional approach to marketing and develop an emotional approach, an emotional connection with the audience. So this is why brand and the focus on brand is so important to us. So that's really that first role. The second one is related to everything engagement and retention. So we have a VP of engagement and customer experience. And the third pillar, which might be a bit surprising, is basically the local markets. So we do have one representative that would represent all the markets that we have, that we invest media on at Deezer. And why is that? Because we do think global consistency, but local relevance is important. And therefore, we want to make sure that we 100% align between central function and local functions.
Brilliant. So where, I guess, from your experience, and this is a question I'm going to ask Chris and Sarah as well, where do you think the biggest disconnect is between CMOs and other departments? Because we're all trying to get to this holistic place where, marketing is an integral part of the business. But where do you think the biggest disconnect is? Is it with finance? Is it with technology or something else?
It's so the biggest risk is definitely, I would say, a disconnect between product and tech on the one side, and then everything related to business on another one. And that's why I really think it's our responsibility as marketers to actually set, the business vision, business objective, and business KPIs, so that you don't have, on the one hand, the product and tech division going one side and doing things on product, and then on the other side, like handling our marketing responsibilities. The risk that you have there is basically having a disconnect between what you sell and the experience that people get once they are on the product. So I think it's really, really important more than ever to align. So I would say I work even more on a daily basis with the VP of product than I would work, with local markets, for instance. We do need to make sure that we're putting things together so that we work towards the same objective, because we actually have the same objective, which is growth. It's just that we might have different ways of understanding it. So I think going back to clear objectives and clear common KPIs, which is something that we do in terms of acquiring new users, new subscribers, monthly active users, working on churn and retention and so on, and aligning, on objectives, I think is really, really important. So I wouldn't say that there's necessarily always a disconnect, but there is always a risk of disconnecting. So this is why we need to anticipate on this.
Thank you. I'm going to come to you next, Sarah. Same question, really. Where's the biggest disconnect or risk of disconnect, as Fleur put it, in terms of other departments?
I think there's a risk of disconnect. Firstly, I would agree with her with the product. Definitely, they're going to add things to the product and not necessarily think about the feeling that you're going to elicit when you're actually using it and how you're going to stick to the brand. I also see it sometimes with finance and also with sales, just because, as I said before, sales can get disconnected from marketing. I mean, they want you, ideally they should be, marketing should be out there clearing the way and kind of knocking everything off the trees, and they're just coming along and picking it up, right? But sometimes they go off on their own direction. And also sometimes it's difficult because in a lot of companies, I think marketing has historically been seen as a cost center, and rather than a investment or a something that is generating the money. It's a cost. Oh, we have to pay for marketing. It's doing all these little fun things. It's like, no, we're providing the growth, and so sometimes there's a little tug of war there. And And I think it's healthy. You have to have that, because otherwise, I could just go crazy. So it's really nice to have that balance. But sometimes there's a perception that needs to be better. Yes.
Okay, and over to you, Chris. What are your thoughts on the subject of all departments being aligned and having an understanding between what each other is doing and empathy for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Florrie already alluded to it, just saying that the CFO and the CEOs and the goals and objectives have to be completely aligned, which I completely agree to. I think that the disconnect, I know there are harper back on history, but the rise of short-termism really sort of occurred, I think it's sort of about 15, 16 years ago. It became even worse. I mean, the marketeer's tenure was quite short anyway, 18 months or 2 years, historically, probably the same now, which meant that they had a very short period to prove themselves, if you like. I also think that digital age, where things can be measured very quickly, lots of things could be measured that people didn't know about beforehand. The recession back in the 2008, 2009, and also how investments were made, whereby people expect quick returns. They wanted their money back quickly. So all these things put incredible amount of pressure on the marketing departments, and they fell into the trap of coming back with things they can measure and talking about things they can measure, which arguably wasn't about long-term growth and didn't value growth plans or sales plans or other aspects of the business. And I think that's where the disconnect occurred between CFOs, CEOs, and CMOs, and the narrative wasn't consistent. And there was a survey done not that long ago, actually, and so the CEO would always trust the CFO much more than the CMO. So you can imagine that already shifts the power base within the board. So that creates its own dynamic. So all these issues were occurring. I think I'm glad to say that the narrative certainly is changing now. People are recognizing that there is a balance between short-termism and long-term. There's lots of work done, and I'm sure you've read the research and seen the research. Around 60% of your money has to be given to long-term thinking and strategy, and I think that it's beginning to play out a little bit, and people are beginning to recognise that CMOs are about, and I think everyone has said it already on the panel. It is about growth, is about sales, and it is about strategy and business strategy. And I think as soon as we can start, as CMOs can start, or CCOs can start to be part of that conversation and be aligned from a goals perspective with the CFOs and other parts of the board, then I think we'll start to see a much better or less disconnect, shall we say, amongst those two.
So it kind of leads into a question that we've had from the audience, and someone's asked, would you say that the CMO role and the marketing team is recognised enough on boards, which I think you've kind of answered in your in what you've just said, but also asked, if not, then what can the CMO do to improve their perception? So what practical tips would you give to the CMO to actually change things?
Yeah, I think that the first thing to do is start to have the conversation at board level with the CFO. Really, that's a really strong relationship, because invariably, especially around difficult times such as we've had this year, the first budgets to go are the marketing budgets. It's very easy to their discretionary spend, very easy to cut. So they tend to be shorter turnarounds than other parts of the business. And then you don't always see immediate downsides to it as well. So they just see the cost saving. So I think there is always a tension between the two, and that's not a bad thing to have. But I would suggest that the biggest thing to do is have a conversation with the CFO, CEO, and start to align business objectives between the two. That's the first step, and I think then that could be expanded out to other parts or other directors on the board and other parts of the organisation. And once you start to align people, then they're working together in tandem rather than in conflict. Because if the CMO's got one set, and the CFO's got another set over here, and the CFO tends to have, shall we say, the greater power in lots, not in every business, but generally speaking in a lot of businesses, or certainly can have the power to stop things, then I think that could be a really healthy start.
And Sarah, coming to you, do you have any advice in terms of CMOs or marketing directors sort of being hyper relevant, is the term that I've heard, hyper relevant, in particularly during today's pandemic times, COVID times?
Tips to making us hyper relevant, or okay, I think we are hyper relevant right now. As I mentioned, it's in this digital time where the teams, either the product team that's developing it or the sales team that's trying to sell it, they cannot go out and reach any people and get that message across and get feedback without us. They really need us to go out and spread the message on a digital platform and in creative, maybe non-traditional ways in order to get our message out there and in order to elicit the feedback that they need to continue. So I think right now we're very important, as they cannot rely on the in-person meetings so much, and they have to rely on other means that we can provide.
And we've had a question from the audience. Someone's asking, what advice would you give to someone in an organization where leaders use phrases like, we just need to do some marketing on this?
Oh, I got that one. Hang on. I hear that one a lot. We just need to do some marketing on that. And they just, they toss it out there, and you're thinking, okay, well, sure, I can just paste up a graphic or, write up a sheet. But it actually, to do it right, you've really got to go back and look. There's got to be a strategy. You got to look at the market. You got to look at yeah, you could do some quick stuff, but you're not going to see a quick return. It has to be a little bit more thought out and planned out. And there's a lot more involved than just, we'll just paint some things on there.
It drives me nuts when they say that.
Yeah.
I've heard that so many times. It really does. I mean, just to put it into perspective, the customer is probably the most valued asset that business has, and I think that's the point, that and ultimately the CMO or the marketing department should have ownership of the most valuable asset. And I think increasingly, when it comes to the data you can layer onto your customers, then that becomes even more important, and you can track those people over a longer period of time and have more personal conversations with them. So that's the conversation I think that more marketeers need to have within their organizations to demonstrate the value they can offer.
Brilliant. And Flor, just coming to you, what are the tools, the digital tools that you are really focusing on this year and through to 2021 to kind of what you're fully embracing as kind of technological tools or platforms to sort of drive growth and engagement?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, I mean, we're a 100% digital business. So as you can imagine, we depend a lot on the digital tools as well as on technology. I think this one is interesting because, we were talking about disconnect and so on. And I do feel that we're talking a lot about product, we're talking a lot about finance, but everything related to tech is also very important. So for instance, every time we want to change something on our homepage or our first pages and so on, we do need tech developers to help us. When we want to implement a new way of tracking things, or we want to change, how we measure things, we also need tech. So we are hyper reliant, both, internally and then externally on digital tools. Then I would say the second big aspect is data. And I think this one is an interesting one, because now the problem is not getting access to data. It's basically that we have too much data. So how do we find the right data to support, our strategy, what we want to achieve and so on. And I feel that on this, it's really a matter of identifying, okay, what do I want to do first? Also, what is my intuition on things, and what data am I going to leverage in order, to validate or invalidate this basically intuition. And I do feel that now that we have data available everywhere, we kind of got rid of intuition, and before marketing was more of an intuition-based role before, digital roles and so on. And I do feel that it's only the mix between data and creativity that will help, creating some differentiation, which is super important in our business because our apps, our products kind of all look the same. So differentiation will be made by actually showing differently from an emotional standpoint, from a messaging standpoint. And we cannot only rely on data. To do that, we also need to rely on creativity, and we need to be able to take risks. So that's the long answer to your question. We are using a lot of digital tools. This being said, brain is also what matters the most ultimately, which is quite reassuring.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, I'm going to come to each of you, and we're going to, if you could, in 30 seconds, answer the question or your thoughts on, is the title CMO obsolete, and is it time to rename it? So I'm going to start with you, Fleur, because we've got you on screen.
Yeah, I honestly think that we don't need to rename the title CMO. This being said, I do think that the mission and the job desk should be rethought every year because, we need to choose our battles. So given everything that we have to cover, I feel that, we have a roadmap for 1 year, and this roadmap will change a lot from 1 year to another. So again, no change in title, but I would say job desk needs to be adapted every year, in my opinion.
Thank you. And Chris, what are your thoughts?
I don't think it's necessary to change the title, but if it does signal a change internally of how you're going to approach customers and marketing, then it's not a bad thing to do, but it's not necessary.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, Sarah, what are your thoughts on the CMO?
I would agree with both of them. I think a title's just a name. It's just a title. The job that we do is probably more important. And I think if I were to give it any kind of a change of name, it would be something to signify, as Chris did, the value of the overall strategy that we have to put together and the size of the desk, as Fleur said. So yes, it's just a name. Although I did have a friend that had a great name. It was Marketing Czar, and I really loved that name. That was really good.
Oh, I like that. I like it.
I like that too. Let's go for that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to champion that. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everyone. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Fleur. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you, but I'm going to have to wrap up now. We've got 2 minutes left. And I've just heard breaking news from Sadie that she's pressed that button. The website is now live, so everyone can go and sign up to mlcircle.com and become a member of this brilliant network. We hope that everyone's had a great hour, informative hour, listening to our very inspiring and engaging and informative speakers. So to sign up for future events, head to the website now. We've got some delicious treats lined up for 2021, some great content, some great events and great news coming up. And apply for membership there. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed our first event, and happy holidays to everyone.